Just about every woodworker makes cabinets and shelves from time to time. And when we start out, we use simple butt joints because they're easy, right? And in time, we graduate to dados because they're stronger and they look more professional. But if you really want to up your game, you might use a sliding dovetail joint because it will make you look like a woodworking master. And there are real advantages to this type of joint. For one thing, it's as strong as it gets. You cannot pull this thing apart. It also makes it possible to assemble a project quickly and easily with no clamps. Technically, you don't even need glue. The boards just hold themselves together. But the key to this whole thing is a slight taper that allows the joint to slide together easily without jamming up halfway through the assembly. Without that taper, which tightens the joint only at the very end, you'd have to hammer the crap out of it to get the thing to go together. Believe me, it is worth taking just a few minutes to see how to make a tapered sliding dovetail joint, because the time will come when you'll be glad you know how to do this. And that's all it's going to take, just a few minutes. I stress that because most of the videos I've seen on the subject are so ridiculously overcomplicated. No wonder people are afraid to try this. My method, though, is so simple anyone can do it. You'll need a router and a straight router bit and a dovetailed router bit. Since I'm going to be working with 3/4 inch thick material, my dovetail router bit is a 1/2 inch wide at its widest point, and my straight bit is a 1/4 inch. If you need router bits, I highly recommend Whiteside Bits. It's a family business in North Carolina that's been making top quality bits for decades. I'll link to the ones I use below the video. Now I've measured the distance between the center of my router bit and the edge of my router plate. Just in case the plate isn't perfectly centered on the router base, I've used a piece of tape to indicate which side of the plate I measured to, and that's the side I'm always going to put against my fence. I've marked my workpiece where the center of my shelf needs to be, and I add to that the measurement I just took from my router plate. That's where I'll attach my fence, which can be a simple straight scrap of wood. With everything clamped in place, I install my straight router bit so it sticks up a 1/4 inch above the router plate. I like to measure this with a combination square, which I will lock at that setting, because I need to repeat that exact bit height 2 more times in this process. Now it's time to route a simple dado. Be sure to move the router from left to right across the fence, or as you see me doing it here. If you go in the opposite direction, the spinning bit will try to push the router away from the fence and you'll end up with a crooked cut. When you finish, swap the straight bit for the dovetail shaped bit, using that same 1/4 inch combination square setting that you saved from before. Then take another pass, this time with that bit, adding a dovetail shape to your dado. Next, get a little scrap of wood to use as a shim. It doesn't have to be an exact thickness, but around 1 millimeter I think is good. Use the shim as a gauge to move one end of your fence back from its original position by that amount. Just one end. The other end stays where it is. You're introducing a slight angle to the fence position. Take a second pass with the router. This will create the tapered shape that we need, one end of the dovetail slot being slightly wider than the other. Especially when I'm using narrow workpieces, I prefer the wider end of the slot to be on the back side of the project, because the narrow end will always look the best. So keep that in mind when you're choosing which end of your fence to shift back. That half of the joint is finished. Next, we have to create a dovetail-shaped tongue on the end of the mating workpiece. That's best done at the router table. All we'll need for this half of the joint is the dovetail-shaped bit. And again, set it that same 1/4 inch above the router table. See why I use the combination square to save that setting? All 3 bit heights have to be identical or you're going to have gaps in your joint. I hope you saved the shim as well. I like mine to be as narrow as possible. I broke this one down to about a 1/4 inch wide. That gets taped to the edge of your shelf board. Which edge? Well, again, when I'm working with narrow stock, I put the shim on the edge that will face the back of the project. Also notice I'm not putting it right at the end of the board. It's a little more than a 1/4 inch away from the end because I don't want the router bit to hit it. You'll see what I mean when I make a cut. I don't want my shim to slip in the gap in my fence around the router bit, so I'm putting a sacrificial face over the bit, essentially creating a zero clearance insert. Now I set the fence so just the corner of the dovetail bit's exposed. I want to make as light a cut as possible at first. I take the first pass on the shim side of the board, letting the shim run right against the fence. Notice how it's above the bit so it doesn't get cut. Then I'll rotate the workpiece and take a second pass on the non-shim side. You can test your fit in your groove if you want at this point, but it's not likely to fit yet. You'll have to make small adjustments to the router table fence, exposing a little bit more of the dovetail bit and taking a deeper cut on each side of the board. Check the fit frequently. It should go together very loosely at first, but tighten as the shelves slip deeper into the groove. You'll know you've got it right when it slips together almost all the way and can be fully seated with a few mallet taps. I'll often cut a test joint first, and then once I get this right, I can leave everything set up the way it is and cut all the joints in my project pretty quickly. This example wasn't perfect, but after a light sanding, it looks pretty good to me. Try it out for yourself. It sure looks better than a regular dado. Now here's another idea that'll up your woodworking game. The Whiteside family has been making router bits in North Carolina for half a century. Their quality is exceptional, their service is fantastic, and I like supporting small family businesses. That's why my cabinet is full of Whiteside bits, and I think yours should be too. Check them out at the link below this video.